The rain hadn't stopped for hours, a relentless downpour that turned the edges of the highway into shallow rivers. My wipers fought uselessly against the storm as my phone's GPS blinked one pulsing dot beneath the overpass ahead. The investigator had been specific. "She's there, Miss Carson." With a child. My stomach tightened. I pulled my car to the muddy shoulder, cutting the engine. For a moment, I sat still staring through the blurred windshield at the shadowed concrete pillars and the faint orange glow of a fire burning in a metal can. I stepped out the cold rain, instantly soaking through my coat, and the smell hit me wet asphalt oil, something sour underneath. The world felt gray, stripped of sound except the thundering rain and my own heartbeat. I spotted movement behind a tarp tied between two pillars. Someone crouched low, rocking gently, a shape bundled in their arms. I called out Lila. My voice barely carried through the storm. The figure stiffened. Then, slowly, my sister turned her head. Her face was thinner than I remembered, bruises faintly visible beneath dirt. Her hair, once chestnut and glossy, hung in clumps over her cheeks. "Emma," she rasped, voice raw. In her arms, a baby whimpered its small hand, clutching her torn sleeve. For a second, we just stared at each other, the sister who'd built an empire from nothing and the one who'd lost everything. The memory of our last encounter flooded back her shouting in front of the family, calling me a thief, telling everyone I forged Dad's will. That humiliation still burned. And yet, here she was, shaking, clutching a feverish child to her chest. My heels sank into the mud as I stepped closer. "You need help," I said. "You shouldn't be here." Her arms tightened protectively around the baby. "We don't need your pity," she snapped, though her voice trembled. "Go home, Emma, just go!" The baby began coughing, a thin, wet sound that sliced through the air. My chest clenched. I knelt, rain splattering against my hair, ignoring the mud that soaked my knees. "She's sick," I said softly. "Let me help." Lila's jaw trembled. For a long moment she said nothing, her eyes darting between me and the storm, the baby's breathing hitched again, weaker this time. That was the breaking point. Her shoulders sagged. "We don't have anywhere else to go," she whispered. I nodded once. "Then you're coming with me." The flash of headlights swept over us as my driver approached. Lila blinked at the luxury car waiting by the curb, disbelief flickering across her face. "You're serious?" she asked. I met her eyes. "Get in, Lila. You and the baby. Now." The rain roared louder, as if the sky itself demanded a choice, and for the first time in years, she followed my lead. I grew up in a house where silence was a rule, not a habit. Our father, Pastor Charles Carson, believed discipline was next to godliness, and fear was his chosen sermon. My mother, Elaine, was the quiet echo of his voice, soft, where he was hard obedient, where he was cruel. Our home looked holy from the outside with its white porch and Sunday smiles, but behind the stained glass windows, obedience meant bruises hidden under long sleeves and prayers whispered through tears. I was the first to break. At 18, after my father slammed my head against a door for asking about missing church funds, I packed a duffel bag and left with $50 and the clothes on my back. Lila stayed. She told me later she thought she could fix him. That's what my mother used to say too, right before she poured whiskey down the drain and earned herself another beating. I built my escape into an empire. I worked through college, started Carson Digital Design, and learned the kind of independence that costs you your softness. For years, I sent letters to Lila, birthday cards, small checks, even one plane ticket. She never replied. Then one Thanksgiving she did. She invited me back. I thought it meant forgiveness. I arrived at the house smiling like a fool, holding a bottle of wine and a designer purse I hoped would make me look successful but not smug. Lila was already there, standing beside our father's coffin, her husband, Derek's arm draped around her shoulders like a trophy. The room was full of church elders and family friends. I walked closer, whispered, "I'm sorry we lost him." Lila turned her eyes glacial. "Are you?" she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Or are you just here to see what you inherited?" The murmurs began immediately. Derek smirked, holding up a stack of papers. "Funny thing, he said, your signature's already here. You signed over your share years ago." My blood went cold. "That's not possible." He shrugged. Then take it up with God. Laughter rippled through the crowd, quiet, awkward, poisoned. I looked at Lila, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. That was the last time we spoke. That moment branded itself into me the way betrayal wears a familiar face. People like to say time heals. It doesn't. It hides the wound under prettier skin. Now standing under that bridge, watching her cradle her baby like a shield, I realized the wound had never closed. We were still those two sisters, one running from the fire, one trapped inside it. But I wasn't a scared girl anymore. I had money, power, and control over my own story. What I didn't have was forgiveness, and yet staring at her hollowed eyes, I couldn't walk away. Blood still recognized blood even after it burned you. 5 years before the night under the bridge, betrayal had already sealed the distance between my sister and me. It happened at our father's funeral the one day I thought might bring us together. The church smelled like lilies and old wood polish. I remember standing by the casket trying to pray, but all I could think of was how quiet death was compared to the noise of his punishments. Lila had married Derek Holt, our father's favorite parish accountant, the man who ran every offering plate like it was his private stock market. He was handsome, polished, confident, exactly the kind of man who could make my sister believe submission was security. I saw it in the way she looked at him like he was safety instead of a cage. After the service, I approached her with a peace offering, a small envelope with a photo of us as kids, hand in hand at the county fair. "We can start over," I whispered. "You don't have to do this alone." But before she could answer, Derek took the envelope, smirked, and said loudly, "You should keep your charity, Emma. My wife doesn't need handouts." The crowd turned. I froze, feeling every eye. Lila said nothing. I forced a smile and walked away. I could have ended it there, but humiliation has a way of digging roots. 2 weeks later, I got a call from our lawyer. Our father's will had been executed. Everything, the church property, the savings, the trust fund, was transferred to Lila and Derek. My name was on a document I'd never seen. The lawyer said, "You signed it last year." My throat went dry. I hadn't. My signature, neat, perfect, practiced, was forged. Derek's work, no doubt. When I confronted Lila over the phone, she hung up after whispering, "You always get what you want, Emma. Let me have this." That sentence broke something in me. I stopped calling, stopped sending cards, stopped remembering birthdays. I told myself she'd chosen her side. In truth, I just couldn't face the version of her I'd lost. The betrayal wasn't just the money, it was the silence afterward, the years of pretending we never existed to each other. I buried myself in work. I made millions, built offices with glass walls that reflected everything except my own loneliness. But betrayal doesn't fade. It waits. It waited in every email I didn't send, every holiday I spent alone. And when I saw her again, wet, bruised, holding a coughing baby under a bridge, I realized the universe doesn't forget. It circles back, forcing you to look at the ruins you tried to outrun. Only this time, I wasn't the broken one. I was the witness. And witnesses don't run, they testify. The folder arrived 3 days before the storm. My assistant left it on my desk without a word, a thin black envelope marked only with the logo of Decker Investigations. I stared at it through 2 meetings and 1 lunch, pretending I didn't see it. Some things feel heavier unopened. My penthouse overlooked Biscayne Bay, sunlight glittering across the water, everything, clean, sterile, under control. That view had always been my reminder I'd escaped. I'd built something no one could take. But the folder sat there like an accusation, daring me to remember what I left behind. That night, I poured a glass of wine and finally slid my finger under the seal. Inside were 6 pages and a single photograph. Lila Carson Holt, 29 years old. Last known residence, a shelter in Columbus, Ohio. Status unhoused. Traveling with a 1-year-old female child, name unknown. Father Derek Holt, whereabouts unconfirmed. The investigator's notes were dry, factual, clinical, like my sister's life was just a list of errors. Last job, cashier. Terminated. Filed police report for domestic assault. Case dismissed. I stared at that line for a long time. Case dismissed. 2 words that always protect men like Derek. Below it, an address coordinates under a highway bridge on the east side of the city. A blurry photograph attached showed a tint blue tarp gray concrete, a faint shadow of a woman crouched beside it. I'd seen countless images in my career architecture branding design, but none that hollowed me out like that one. My hand trembled as I placed it on my desk, water ring staining the black page. I thought of the last time I saw her smile years ago, sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor, painting her nails bright red and telling me I worried too much. I thought of all the nights I imagined she was happy somewhere far away from our father's voice. Instead, she was here one state away, reduced to a statistic living under concrete with a sick baby. The wine went untouched. I called Decker personally. "This is accurate," I asked. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "We confirmed yesterday." I ended the call and stared at my reflection in the glass wall. I looked composed, successful, untouchable. But inside, the same fire that once drove me to escape was back burning hotter. That night, I packed a single suitcase, texted my pilot, and ordered the jet ready by dawn. The bridge that ruined us was about to meet the woman who refused to drown. Dawn came with that pale, silvery light that makes the ocean look like glass. I sat in the cabin of my jet hands, wrapped around a cup of coffee I couldn't drink. The city shrank beneath us until Miami was just a shimmer of steel and memory. I should have been reviewing contracts or answering emails, the things I usually did to fill silence, but my mind kept drifting to the photo of the blue tarp. I'd enlarged it on my tablet before takeoff. There was a small blur near Lila's shoulder, a child's hand reaching up, fingers spread. It wasn't just a picture, it was evidence of everything I'd tried not to see. My assistant Grace had texted before boarding. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" I typed and erased 3 replies before sending one word. Yes. Somewhere over Georgia, the pilot's voice came through the intercom. "We'll hit some weather over Ohio, ma'am." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Fitting, I thought. Every reckoning deserves rain. I looked out the window, watching clouds gather like bruises across the sky. I'd spent 10 years crafting a life so insulated that storms couldn't reach me. Soundproof offices, penthouses, noise-canceling headphones, polite smiles that kept people at arm's length. But safety can become a prison, too. I told myself I was going for the baby for innocence untainted by family rot. The truth was harder. I needed to see what became of the sister who once called me her mirror. As the jet descended through thick gray clouds, I caught my reflection in the window. Sharp suit, steady eyes, the face of someone who wins. But I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like someone standing at the edge of something raw and unfinished. I remembered the last words our father ever said to me before I left home. "You'll regret turning your back on blood." Maybe this was what he meant, coming back not for forgiveness but for closure. The seatbelt light blinked. I set my cup down, straightened my jacket, and watched the rain streak across the glass. Columbus waited below, cold and gray, holding the ghost of everything I'd tried to bury. Somewhere under that bridge, my sister was still fighting the storm. This time, I was going to meet it with her. The storm had followed me north, turning the city into a blur of wet asphalt and steam. My driver, Thomas, maneuvered through the empty highway with the kind of precision that comes from both habit and fear of expensive damage. "You're sure this is the spot, ma'am?" he asked, glancing at me through the rearview mirror. "Yes," I said, my eyes fixed on the GPS. "Under the east ramp. Pull over there." He slowed, tires crunching over gravel. Rain hammered against the windshield so hard it sounded like applause. I stepped out before he could offer an umbrella, the cold biting through my coat. The underpass loomed ahead, massive concrete pillars rising into shadow graffiti bleeding down their sides. Trash scattered in small piles, soaked and shapeless. Then a cry, faint but unmistakable. I followed its shoes sinking into the mud until I saw the blue tarp. A small flicker of firelight glowed inside. I hesitated, then called softly, "Lila." The tarp shifted. My sister crawled halfway out, her hair plastered to her forehead, her eyes wild. "Emma!" Her voice cracked. "What are you doing here? Looking for you!" She laughed short and bitter. "What, to make sure I'm really as pathetic as you thought I took a slow step forward?" "I came because of her." I nodded toward the bundle in her arms. The baby was wrapped in a damp blanket, her face flushed eyes half closed. The sight twisted something in me. "She's sick," I said. "She needs a doctor." "We went to the ER," Lila snapped. "They gave us Tylenol and told me to leave when I couldn't pay." Her voice broke. "Do you think I haven't tried?" For a moment, we just stood there, two women who used to share secrets under blankets, now separated by more than just years. "Let me help," I said quietly. "I don't need your pity. It's not pity, it's survival." I stepped closer, rain dripping from my hair. "You have two choices: stay here and watch her get worse, or come with me." Lila's grip on the baby tightened. Her eyes searched mine, looking for the trap. Derek had trained her to see betrayal in every kindness. Finally, her shoulders sagged. "I don't even have shoes that match," she muttered like it mattered. "I don't care," I said. "Just bring her." Thomas appeared behind me with an umbrella. His expression didn't change when he saw them. Years of discretion had taught him that silence was loyalty. As he opened the car door, the baby coughed again, a soft, ragged sound that made Lila flinch. "You're serious," she whispered. "Completely." I extended my hand. She stared at it like it was a burning coal, then placed hers in mine. It was ice-cold, trembling. For the first time in a decade, our hands fit together again. I didn't say it aloud, but the truth hit me hard and clear. I wasn't rescuing her. I was rescuing what was left of us. The hotel suite smelled of antiseptic and wet clothes. I'd rented the entire top floor for privacy, though the luxury felt obscene compared to where I'd found them. Dr. Winters, my on-call physician, was already waiting, her calm precision cutting through the chaos. "She's running a fever," she said, pressing a thermometer to the baby's temple. 103. "She's dehydrated." Lila sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulders shaking as she clutched the damp blanket. "I told them she was sick," she whispered. "The ER said it was nothing." Winter's expression didn't change, but her tone sharpened. "They sent you home." Lila nodded. I turned away, fury crawling up my spine. In my world, problems were solved with signatures and wire transfers. In hers, compassion depended on a zip code. Winters moved efficiently, unpacking antibiotics, a tiny syringe Pedialyte. "She'll be okay," she said quietly. "But she needs rest, warmth, and food." Both of them do. I thanked her, my voice steadier than I felt. When the door closed, silence filled the room again, thick, heavy, intimate. I ordered food, soup, and bread, but Lila just stared at it. Her eyes darted to the chandelier, the silk curtains, the city lights below. "I don't belong here," she murmured. "This isn't real." "It's real enough," I said. "You and Maya are safe tonight." She flinched at the baby's name. "You know her name?" "It was in the report." She looked at me, then really looked. Eyes swollen, but still the same hazel as when we were children. "Why are you doing this, Emma?" she asked. "Because someone has to." I meant it as compassion, but it came out colder than I intended. She pulled the blanket tighter, rocking the baby gently. "Derek said you'd come one day," she said almost to herself. "That you'd want something. That you never do anything without a reason." I opened my mouth, then stopped. The gaslighting hadn't just scarred her, it had rewritten her sense of reality. I stepped closer, crouching to meet her eyes. "What I want," I said quietly, "is for you to stop surviving and start living." She blinked, uncertain whether to believe me. Maya whimpered softly. Lila's hand brushed her hair back, the motion tender mechanical. I turned away, giving her space. Through the glass wall, lightning illuminated the skyline, and for a moment, our reflections merged, hers hollowed by years of fear, mine armored by years of control. Two survivors of the same house finally under one roof again. Lila fell asleep, sitting up, one hand still wrapped protectively around Maya. The doctor's instructions were simple: keep her warm, keep her fed, but nothing about how to rebuild trust in a single night. I dimmed the lights and stood by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass like tears I didn't know how to shed. I'd spent years mastering detachment, the art of not feeling too much, not needing anyone. Now the sight of my sister, thin, broken, still trying to soothe her child even in her sleep, was undoing all that careful control. Maya whimpered once, then settled. The faint rise and fall of her chest was steady again, a rhythm of survival. I poured 2 glasses of water, set one on the table beside Lila. She didn't stir. The bruises along her wrists were fading to yellow, old enough to have healed but not to be forgotten. I'd seen that look before in shelters and case files in women who believed pain was a form of love. Derek had done more than break her body. He'd rewritten her sense of truth. I took out my phone and opened the old folder I'd started keeping years ago. Names, receipts, legal documents, every whisper I'd ever heard about Derek Holt's finances. He'd hidden behind religion money and our father's legacy for too long. I drafted a short message to my lawyer. Find Derek Holt. Quietly. The cursor blinked at me, waiting for confirmation. My finger hovered before I hit send. There was satisfaction in the act, measured strategic clean. Justice wasn't loud, it was surgical. Behind me, Lila shifted, murmuring something I couldn't make out. Her voice was small, lost like a child calling out in a dream. "It's okay," I whispered, though she couldn't hear me. I sat down on the edge of the couch and stared at the city lights. People thought success insulated you from pain. It didn't. It just gave you better walls to hide behind. Tonight, those walls didn't feel safe. They felt suffocating. I closed my eyes and breathed, letting the sound of the rain fill the room. Tomorrow, there would be questions and explanations. Tonight, there was just this fragile peace balanced between exhaustion and fury. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure which of us needed saving more. By morning, the rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, the kind that felt more like memory than weather. Lila sat by the window of the suite, wrapped in one of my spare sweaters, staring out at the city like she was trying to memorize it before leaving. Maya slept in her arms, her fever finally broken. "We're flying home," I said quietly, closing my laptop. "Florida," she asked, her tone wary, as though the word itself might bite. "Yes. You'll stay with me at Haven House until you decide what's next." She frowned. "I don't want to be your charity case." "You're not. You're family." The word hung between us like a fragile bridge. She looked away. I arranged for checkout, my assistant already coordinating a pediatrician and therapist to meet us upon arrival. As we stepped into the elevator, she hesitated. "Emma," she said softly, "why are you doing this?" I met her gaze. "Because I'm tired of watching people drown while pretending I'm on dry land." She didn't respond, but her fingers tightened around Maya. At the private terminal, the jet waited, sleek, warm, familiar. The same jet that had once carried me to award ceremonies and investor meetings now stood ready for something infinitely heavier: redemption. During takeoff, the silence was thick. I sat opposite them, pretending to read emails while studying her reflection in the window. She still flinched at every sound, still checked the baby's breathing every few minutes. Trauma lingers in habits long after bruises fade. Midway through the flight, she finally spoke. "You know," she said, her voice low, "he told me you forged the will, that you manipulated Dad. That's why I believed him." I looked up. "And you think I'd ever do that?" "I don't know what to think anymore," she admitted. "He made me believe everyone was against us, that you only cared about yourself." I let the words settle. I could have argued, defended, demanded an apology, but none of that would matter. "He lied to both of us," I said simply. She studied my face, searching for anger. "You're not mad I was. For years. But anger's just grief that ran out of places to go." Lila looked down at Maya, stroking her cheek. "She doesn't deserve the kind of family we had." "Then let's build her a new one," I said. "One that doesn't start with lies." Outside, clouds broke apart, and the Florida coast came into view, golden, endless, and clean. For the first time in years, going home didn't feel like defeat. It felt like rewriting the ending. Haven House sat at this edge of the ocean, its white columns facing the waves like an old sentinel that had seen too much and learned to stay silent. The house had once been my design studio, a place I built from the ruins of our father's money and my own defiance. Now it felt different. It looked less like a trophy and more like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. When we arrived, the air smelled of salt and gardenias, the driveway glistening from a recent rain. Lila stepped out slowly, clutching Maya, her eyes darting from the manicured hedges to the open veranda. "You live here," she whispered. "It's home," I said, though the word had always felt foreign on my tongue. Inside, the house was quiet, except for the hum of the ocean beyond the glass. I'd ordered the guest suite prepared, soft lighting, neutral tones, a crib I'd had delivered that morning. Lila walked through the rooms like a trespasser, every polished surface reflecting the difference between who we'd become. "You don't have to like it," I said gently. "You just have to rest." She nodded, but her shoulders stayed tense like she was waiting for the catch. I left her to settle and went upstairs to my office, where a single manila folder waited on the desk, Decker's addendum. I opened it. Inside were 3 bank statements and a police report. Derek Holt's accounts were empty, his company under investigation for embezzlement. The note at the bottom read, "Multiple reports of domestic violence dismissed. Same pattern as before." I ran my thumb along the paper's edge. The system protected men like him because they knew how to wear respectability like armor. I thought of my father standing at the pulpit preaching about forgiveness while his belt hung from his wrist. I'd forgiven him once and it had cost me everything. This time, I wasn't forgiving. This time, I was documenting. I called my old friend Detective Alan Reyes now with the State Financial Crimes Unit. "Alan," I said, "I've got something for you." His voice sharpened instantly. "Derek Holt. You remember him. Hard to forget the man who used scripture to launder money." I heard him pull out a notepad. "Send me everything." "Already in your inbox," I said. "Quietly, Alan." "Always," he replied. When I hung up, I felt the old steadiness return. Not rage, not revenge, just purpose. Justice, when done right, didn't shout. It waited. That night, I found Lila in the nursery watching Maya sleep. "Thank you," she said softly, not meeting my eyes. "For what?" "For not saying, 'I told you so.'" I leaned against the doorway, the smell of salt drifting in from the sea. "You already knew," I said. "That's punishment enough." She gave a sad, crooked smile, and for the first time I saw the sister I remembered, the one before the lies, the one before him. The call came 3 days later. Alan's voice carried the calm edge of a man who'd just cornered a predator. "We've got him," he said. "Derek Holt's in custody, fraud, tax evasion, and at least 1 pending assault charge. We found forged donation ledgers, your father's old church funds laundered through his company." I stared out at the ocean from my office window. The waves crashed against the rocks below like applause from the universe itself. "He'll talk," Alan added. "Men like him always do when their money disappears. Make sure the press hears every word I said." Quietly. "Understood." I hung up, feeling a strange stillness settle in my chest. It wasn't triumph, it was relief, sharp and hollow. I went downstairs where Lila sat on the terrace feeding Maya mashed peaches. The sunlight painted her hair gold, the bruises nearly faded now. "You heard?" she said, her voice flat. "He's been arrested." I nodded. Alan called. "He'll blame me," she murmured. "He always does." "He can't hurt you anymore," I said. She shook her head. "You don't understand. Derek doesn't need to touch you to make you bleed. He makes the world believe you deserve it." I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. "The world already knows the truth," I said, showing her the headline from the local paper. "Pastor's accountant arrested for fraud and domestic abuse." Her eyes widened. "You did this? I just made sure justice could see him." Her lip trembled half in fear, half in disbelief. "You burned his kingdom," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "He built it out of stolen bones. I just took away the scaffolding." Maya giggled, smearing fruit across her chin. The sound broke the tension like sunlight through fog. Lila exhaled, finally letting go of the breath she'd been holding for years. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," I said, "you heal. You take back your name. And when you're ready, you testify. You tell the truth about every bruise he made you hide." She stared at me, then nodded slowly. "And you?" I looked toward the horizon where the sky met the sea. "I keep building. This house used to be my fortress. Maybe it's time it became something else." "What a refuge." For the first time, she smiled, not the broken half-smile of survival, but something almost whole. Later that evening, as the sunset turned the waves to molten gold, I stood alone on the balcony, the scent of salt and citrus in the air. I thought of all the years I'd spent trying to be untouchable, mistaking distance for power. But real power, I realized, wasn't in walls or wealth. It was in choosing to face what you ran from and setting it on fire when it came for you again. Justice had come full circle, and for once it felt earned. The following month unfolded like quiet dawn after a decade-long storm. News of Derek Holt's arrest spread through every network and social feed, the once holy man now reduced to headlines about fraud, coercion, and abuse. I didn't celebrate. I simply watched, coffee in hand, as the public finally saw what we had always known. Lila avoided the television for a while. She spent her mornings in the garden barefoot Maya, toddling between the rows of hibiscus. Sometimes I'd see her pause mid-step, just breathing. Healing like grief doesn't arrive in dramatic moments. It seeps in through sunlight and silence. One morning, she joined me on the terrace holding a folder of her own court documents, custody papers, restraining orders. "It's done," she said quietly. "He's denied bail. They froze his assets." Her voice didn't tremble this time. "You did that," I replied. "You told the truth." She shrugged, but her eyes softened. "You gave me the space to remember who I was before him." I smiled. Then we both built something better from the wreckage. Later that week, I gathered a few colleagues at the estate, architects, lawyers, social workers. We stood in the old West Wing sunlight spilling across white walls. "This house was once built to protect me," I said. "Now it's going to protect others." I unveiled the plans, the Haven Foundation, a nonprofit that would provide housing and legal resources for women escaping domestic abuse. Lila stood in the corner, holding Maya, tears running freely this time, not from fear, but pride. "You're turning the past into shelter," she whispered. "It's what Haven House was always meant to be," I said. Weeks later, at the foundation's launch, cameras flashed as donors arrived, journalists whispered, and somewhere in the crowd I saw faces from my past, the women from my father's old congregation board members who once looked down on me for leaving. Now they nodded with respect, not because I'd become rich or powerful, but because I'd become undeniable. In my speech, I didn't mention Derek. I didn't mention our father. I spoke only of women who survive. When a storm destroys your home, I said, you don't rebuild the same walls. You design better ones. The applause was long, almost reverent. That night, after the guests left, Lila and I stood on the balcony watching the sea turn silver under the moon. Maya slept in her crib upstairs, her breathing soft and steady. "You know, Lila said Dad used to say our blood was a curse." "Then we changed it," I said. She nodded. "Maybe redemption runs in our family too." I thought about that long after she went to bed, the idea that something good could grow from the ashes. I walked through the halls of Haven House, touching the walls that once echoed with my loneliness. They felt alive again. The ghosts were gone, replaced by laughter from a child who would never know the bridge, the bruises, or the fear. Justice wasn't revenge. It was inheritance rewritten. And this time, the legacy was mercy. The call from the front gate came late one afternoon when the air was heavy with the scent of rain and jasmine. Ms. Carson, the guard, said through the intercom, his tone cautious. "There's a man here asking for Mrs. Holt. Says his name is Derek." For a moment, I couldn't speak. It had been 3 months since the trial, too, since the last headline. "Tell him to leave," I said automatically. But then I heard a child's laughter echo from the garden, Maya chasing butterflies with Lila under the fading sun. My heart stuttered. "Wait," I said. "I'm coming down." By the time I reached the gate, Derek stood soaked in the drizzle, wearing a wrinkled shirt and a smirk that hadn't faded even in ruin. He'd lost weight, his eyes sunken, but still glinting with that same poisonous charm. "You've been busy," he said, glancing at the manicured hedges, the stone archway with Haven Foundation etched in gold. "Using my wife's misery for your little redemption project." I folded my arms. "You're trespassing." He laughed softly. "This place, this life, you think it's yours now. You forget, Emma. I built it first." "You built a cage," I said. "I just tore down the walls." The guards stepped closer, but he raised a hand. "I'm not here to fight. I just want to see my daughter." His voice softened, rehearsed the predator's calm. "She's mine too." I met his gaze, cold and unwavering. "You lost that right when she learned what fear looked like." He chuckled, the sound dry and hollow. "You can't erase me." "No," I said quietly, "but I can outlive you." He leaned closer to the gate, rain streaking down his face. You think a piece of paper can stop me? You think your money makes you God? I pressed the intercom button beside me, my voice steady. Call the police. He slammed a hand against the bars, the metal vibrating. You don't get to decide whose family, he shouted. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. I already did. The patrol car arrived within minutes. Derek was still shouting when they handcuffed him, his words drowned by thunder. As they drove away, the storm broke fully rain cascading over the garden, washing the dust from the air. Inside, Lila stood at the top of the stairs, pale shaking. He was here, wasn't he? Yes, I said. He won't be again. Her breath came shallow. He'll never stop. Then we'll make sure he can't. I handed her the new order of protection Alan had expedited 5 years statewide. You're safe, Lila. This time the law stands with us. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I thought I'd never see the day. Later that night, after she'd fallen asleep beside Maya, I sat in my office listening to the rain. I replayed the image of Derek at the gate, drenched and desperate, shouting at the life he could no longer touch. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. It felt like closing a chapter written in blood and fear. For years, he'd defined our lives first through charm, then through violence, and finally through absence. Now there was only silence, deep and clean. Outside, the security lights flickered on, illuminating the wet driveway. The gate stood locked, the world beyond it, finally small again. I closed my eyes and let the storm fade into the distance. Justice wasn't loud. It was the sound of a door shutting on the past and staying closed. Time. Once something I used to race began to slow. Seasons rolled gently across the estate. Spring light softening the garden summer waves, turning the air to salt autumn breezes sweeping through the verandas. Lila found rhythm again. She started working part-time at the Haven Foundation counseling women who arrived barefoot, bruised and trembling the way she once had. She didn't tell them her story outright, but they sensed it. Survival recognizes its own kind. Maya grew fast, her laughter bright as the wind chimes outside my study. Every sound of her feet across the marble floor reminded me of what we'd almost lost under that bridge. Sometimes I caught Lila watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, her eyes carrying gratitude, guilt, and wonder all at once. You saved us, she said once over coffee, her hands trembling just slightly around the mug. I shook my head. We saved each other. She smiled, then looked down. I still have nightmares sometimes. I wake up and think I'm back there under that overpass waiting for the rain to stop. I reached across the table, resting my hand on hers. Rain always stops, I said softly. You just have to live long enough to see the sun come back. Months turned into years. The foundation grew. We opened shelters in 3 new states, each named Haven. Each one born from the ashes of pain, turned into purpose. Women sent letters, hundreds of them. Some were scribbled in shaky handwriting, others neatly typed, all thanking us for giving them their first night of sleep without fear. I kept every one of them in a drawer in my office alongside that old photo of Lila and me as kids at the county fair, the same one Derek had sneered at all those years ago. One evening, I came home from a meeting to find Lila painting the nursery walls a soft yellow. Maya was older now, 5 years old, and full of questions. Why yellow? I asked. Because it's the color of starting over, Lila said. And I think it's time this house stopped feeling like a memory. I helped her paint, both of us laughing when drops splattered across the floor. It was the first time I'd laughed freely in years, the kind of laughter that made the body lighter. Later, after Maya was tucked in, Lila and I sat on the porch with wine and the distant hum of the sea. Do you ever think about him? She asked quietly. Derek? I nodded. Sometimes. But not with anger anymore. Just distance. He doesn't exist in this version of our story. She looked at me, her eyes reflecting the soft porch light. You make it sound so easy. It's not, I said. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing the part of you they tried to own. As the night deepened, I realized something simple yet profound. Our survival wasn't revenge. It was resurrection. The kind of justice that doesn't shout but endures. Lila leaned her head on my shoulder, the rhythm of her breathing matching the waves. And for the first time, Haven House felt exactly as its name promised, a home that held no ghosts, only beginnings. It was a Sunday morning when the letter arrived, handwritten, the paper cheap and crumpled, postmarked from a state correctional facility 2 hours north. I knew the handwriting instantly. Derek Holt. I stared at it for a long time before breaking the seal. Inside were 3 pages, shaky and desperate. "Lila," it began. "They tell me you're doing fine. That our daughter's alive. I've had a lot of time to think. I made mistakes, but prison isn't justice, it's hell. I'm sick. I don't have long. I want to see Maya. She deserves to know her father tried to change. There were smudges along the margins, tears maybe, or sweat, or just the residue of a man clinging to something he no longer owned." I folded the pages carefully and placed them in a drawer. I told myself I wouldn't show her. But by evening, Lila was in my office, her eyes rimmed red. "He wrote me too," she said. She handed me her copy of the same letter, creased from being opened and closed too many times. "He's dying." Her voice cracked. "I don't know what to feel." I motioned for her to sit. "You don't owe him anything," I said. "You owe yourself peace." She nodded, but the conflict was raw and human grief tangled with memory, love buried under fear. "I used to dream he'd come back changed," she whispered. "But even now he finds a way to make me feel small." We sat in silence for a while, the sound of waves faint through the open window. Then she said something that made my chest tighten. "I want to visit him, not for him for me. I want to look him in the eye and end it." I hesitated, then nodded. "I'll come with you." 2 days later, we walked through the gray corridors of the prison, our footsteps echoing off concrete walls. Derek sat behind the glass divider, his skin-sallow eyes dull, but still searching for control. When he saw Lila, a flicker of something crossed his face. Shame or pride, I couldn't tell. "You look good," he rasped. Lila didn't answer. "You brought her?" he asked, glancing toward me. "No," I said. "You don't get to see her." He coughed, his hand trembling. "You can't keep her from knowing who I am." Lila leaned forward, her voice steady. "She knows exactly who you are. You're the reason I learned what strength looks like." Derek's face twisted, the smirk faltering. "You think you're free of me?" "I don't think," she said softly. "I know." When we left, the air outside smelled of rain, again cleaner this time. Lila didn't speak until we reached the car. "He's dying," she said. "Then let him die in the world he built," I replied. "Ours doesn't belong to him anymore." That evening, as the sun dipped into the sea, I watched Maya chase waves along the shore, her laughter echoing over the water. Lila joined her barefoot and radiant, her hair catching the last light. I thought about that bridge, about all the ghosts we'd buried there without funerals. We'd survived, not because the world was kind, but because we refused to let cruelty be the ending. I sat on the porch until the stars appeared, holding Derek's letter in my hand one last time before setting it alight. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished into smoke carried away by the ocean wind. I whispered into the night. Some stories end in fire so others can begin in light. And for the first time in my life, I believed it.